but, you know.
I heard I had a lot of supporters. Mr.
Oh, you have a fan club out there, Senator. So without further ado, I know you got to be 4 places at once tonight. Floor is yours, sir. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And I appreciate what you did this afternoon, over the noon hour. And I do appreciate that there's a lot of intense lobbying going on about the subject of renewable energy and electricity taxes and all of that. So my bill that I proposed was part of it's a companion bill to another bill in the House. And the thinking behind it is just like this. Statewide, we collect a sales tax on electricity. It's the same rate as any other tax in your local jurisdiction. For example, in Casper, is it 6 or 7%? I'll just say it's 7%. Other parts of the state range, I don't think any are less than 6 anymore. But that sales tax is collected and is on top of the fee that you're charged for electricity. It's a pretty hefty tax, really, when you think about it. And so everybody in Wyoming pays that tax. Attach that to the fact that the mix of electricity generation is changing in Wyoming. We're evolving away from fossil fuel-based electricity generation into renewables and possibly nuclear, pumped hydro, could be banks of batteries. All of these things are happening. And a key difference between the newer forms of generation and the older forms of generation is that it may surprise you, but we already have a tax on the production of electricity in Wyoming. It's a very big tax. It's called the coal severance tax. And what that is a tax on coal. The production of coal, it's roughly 6%, and that applies to all the coal that's mined in Wyoming. But all the coal in Wyoming is mined for the purpose of producing electricity. Now, there is a small exception. There's some metallurgical coal in a mine, I think in Sweetwater County, if I remember right. But it's relatively small. So we already tax the generation that's produced from that coal because we tax the coal. That coal is burned in plants in Texas, in Illinois, in Ohio, and it's gone as far east as Indiana and even farther potentially. But those plants are either one being closed, scheduled for closure, or they're producing less. They're producing less because some are being converted to natural gas or they're burning less coal. But some of the plants are just running less because there's more and more renewables available. And if you're a utility and you're looking to, you have 2 choices. You're running your plants this afternoon, you're trying to decide whether you're going to send coal-fired power or the fact that solar is online, and solar doesn't cost you anything because you don't have to buy the fuel or pay the tax. So you dispatch the solar. Even though coal might be cheaper in a lot of ways and more dependable and all those things, and I agree with people about this, about reliability, that's not really the issue. The point I want to make is we already tax electricity, but we're going to lose that tax over time, lose bits of it. And so if you remember, in Rocky Mountain Power Territory, 85% of electricity is exported. So 15% is sold in Wyoming, 85% is sold somewhere else. Just looking at that one utility, if we roll back the sales tax on the 15% that's sold in Wyoming, but we put a tax on all the sales of that utility, we rake in money at the ratio of 85 to 15. And so we export taxes, and we could keep our people even. There's a lot of things at play. There are also independent power producers that don't even connect to the grid. The largest renewable power project in North America is slated to be started in Carbon County, and it's the Anschutz project, and it is not going to provide any power whatsoever for Wyoming. All of that power is going to go out of the state. But we have all the impacts. We all have the loss of land. We have permanent impacts on our landscape. And in all this mix, we lose our our fossil fuel-based tax revenues. So my thinking is, well, if we got rid of the sales tax and we put in a gross receipts tax or possibly a generation tax, but another way to tax those sales, we can make it even for our people in Wyoming. You could actually dial it in different ways. Wyoming customers could see a reduction out of all this, just how you set the different levels of taxes. I also, with respect to the other bill, Mr. Chairman, and how this all works, we wanted to respect our taxpayers that actually are they have their oars in the water in Wyoming. So the bill that's the companion bill in the House, which, it wasn't introduced, had that the taxpayer could actually receive a credit for all the other taxes paid. Meaning if they paid severance tax, or they paid ad valorem tax on minerals, that would come off their tax bill. So as all these three things blend together, and I hope maybe someone will take it up in the interim, but you could think of a way that Wyoming customers don't pay any more. We don't hurt our traditional industries that have carried the freight in Wyoming. And we begin to capture a revenue stream from new generation sources located in Wyoming that have great impacts in Wyoming, but don't produce a lot of tax revenue. If you think about the relative nature of all those levels, you could set the taxes at a rate where Wyoming customers are better off. And, I know that what you heard today, because I know the lawyers and all that, they're saying, well, you can't do this because other states won't let you. So the sales tax is wholly within the jurisdiction of Wyoming. It's a tax we impose on our own people. We have jurisdiction there. We can also establish a tax that applies to all states equally, including ourselves. And so you can't make an argument that Wyoming is treating itself differently because we're imposing a new tax that affects Wyoming people just as much as other people.
I think you're thinking the same question I am. Go ahead, Senator McEwen. If you don't mind, we're going to interrupt real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we were at that one point, before I forget about it,
Yeah,
it's been a pretty long 2 days for all of us.
sure has.
Do you believe when we change this, if we were to pass this bill, people are going to quit buying energy from Wyoming and get it elsewhere? Or is it not going to affect the sales? That's what we heard a lot of earlier. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Case?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that. There may be a dampening effect that'll sort itself out. But I respond with the fact that when we put a wind tax on renewables, everybody said the world was going to fall apart, blah, blah, blah. And for years, they said, your wind tax is keeping development from happening in Wyoming. It just wasn't true. The truth was there wasn't transmission. Now there's plenty of transmission, so Wyoming is a hot place again. People west of us, especially the coastal states of Washington, Oregon, California, they have difficulty siting large renewable installations in their own backyard. They pay a hefty amount for electricity. We're targeted because it's easier to site those facilities here. And despite the extra cost of transmission, we have a wind tax, a tiny, tiny wind tax that's less than other states' other taxes. Despite those things, they still want to site it here. And of course, they're going to tell you, and they've hired these very, the best lobbying firm probably in the West to tell us that this will destroy the industry. But Mr. Chairman, if I may, we all have our feelings about renewable, and I know how a lot of you guys feel, okay? And I'm not trying to defend renewables, but I do think they're here to stay in the sense that we will be building new renewable projects in the West for probably the next 50 years. I don't see that changing. You may disagree with me, okay? Please don't fight about that. So we may delay a couple of projects for a few years here, But I think that the amount of renewables and the need for energy and the fact that renewable energies are going to be higher on the choice matrix of people to the west means that for the next 50 years, they'll be adding new renewable projects here. Will this tax maybe slow it down a little bit? I might say that's a good thing. I think it's happening so fast that our industrial siding can't handle it. There are lots of environmental consequences of having this much development on our landscape. And so it's not really a bad thing to put the brakes on it a little bit. It's not going to stop it. And it's a process that's going to happen for maybe the next 5 decades. I hope that helps.
It does. Do you have a follow-up or anything?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, no, you pretty much answered that quite well.
Right on. Senator Ide?
Thank you, Chairman Bidman. Senator Case, thanks for your testimony there. I know that you mentioned a word that makes guys like me a little nervous when you said gross receipts tax. I know that was discussion in the past when times were tough and how do we get more money. Would this be an avenue, the nose under the tent, the proverbial nose under the tent, to start in on a gross receipts tax for other things? Thank you.
Senator Case?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a full answer to that. We actually, and I know the boogeyman is the income tax in Wyoming, right? I mean, and gross receipts sounds a little bit more like an income tax than our other taxes. And so that's why in this bill, we have that provision that the taxpayer can deduct all their other state and local taxes that they pay from their tax bill. And that's taken right out of the Wyoming Constitution for the income tax. We didn't need to do that, but I thought that that was kind of the right thing to do, because that piece of our Constitution says that if you already pay a lot of taxes, you shouldn't pay a new tax. In the Constitution, it says an income tax. I'm trying to do the same thing for the gross receipts tax. It doesn't have to be a gross receipts tax. In my previous days on revenue, we looked at it as a generation tax, kind of working like the wind tax does. That could work as well. It certainly can. There was a university study from a professor named Godby that he put down our per megawatt hour wind tax and said that the producers would prefer a gross receipts tax. That was his testimony, and there was a study. They have advantages and disadvantages. Is it opening the door? Well, I could tell you that our severance tax is actually an income tax or a gross receipts tax. It really is. It's on gross sales. So it's not the first time. Would it lead to other times? We have to protect against that. In this situation where we export most of our electricity and we give our in-state people an offsetting benefit that's gigantic, I think it's worth taking the risk if you want, Senator Ide, or I think it's good policy, but it could be structured as just a generation tax.
Senator French?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Case, if this is moved on and let's say approved, what effect will it have on the Wyoming ratepayers? Because I know there's a certain amount of electricity that they're producing from the fossil fuels. The Wyoming ratepayers get a certain amount of that electricity. Most of it goes out of state, granted. What kind of impact, because we, a few months ago, had a huge debate on 30%, I think it was, rate hike from somebody, and I think they dropped it to, I want to say 10, but I don't know the exact number. What effect would it have on the Wyoming folks that get their electricity from these people that are producing it here in the state?
Senator?
Well, Mr. Chairman, my plan is that Wyoming people don't see any increase from this. That the offsetting the sales tax by getting rid of it for everybody in Wyoming and imposing another tax that, that Wyoming people will not see any increase whatsoever. Now, we can adjust all those levels. You know, you can get rid of a 5% tax over here, and you can impose a 5% tax over here and forget about all the credits for a while, but that would be even Steven. But you can also adjust it so with the credits for the other taxes paid, this 5% tax is effectively a 2% tax. They get a 5% decrease here, the net is that they're a reduction. And it's just a matter of deciding how much money we want to raise, and implementing it and dialing it in correctly. Over time, there'll be fewer credits for the producers because there will likely be fewer fossil fuel-based taxes that are the hefty taxes to take as credits, so that the amount of revenue produced will be more. But we can keep that so that we don't offset the 5% reduction that we're giving our people. And it's actually more than 5%. I mean, that's why I hope you'll just keep playing with this and keep it on the table. Right now, since there's no companion bill in the other house, this bill says it's only effective, we only get rid of the sales tax if we put in some kind of other tax, right? Well, there isn't anything in the House. We could pass this forward as kind of a statement. It'd be fun for me if it was passed out of committee. I don't care if we don't debate it on the floor. But I think it would show these people that we actually are serious about this issue. And right now, as it stands, they think they wandered in here and discouraged you from being here by coming in this afternoon saying this will destroy the world. It really deserves more look at.
Any further questions, committee? One thing that did come up from, I think, WIAC,
Yeah.
that is, in a nutshell, we wouldn't be able to offload this new tax onto, say, Washington, Oregon, California. I'm sure you've heard that argument. What's your response to that? And
Right.
also the fact that we'd be undercutting our efforts on the, like, if it does go to the Supreme Court, we'd have a fight on our hands as to what's going on with Washington State and their credit scheme that they have going on.
So I have a little bone to pick about the WIAC. So WIAC is represented by Holland and Hart, right? Holland and Hart also represents a huge book of renewable energy producing clients, including big wind companies. So I think when they say they're talking about WIAC, they might be talking about their other clients. I don't blame them. It's free world. They're deserving of the best representation. But I don't totally agree with that description. I was in the Rocky Mountain rate case. I'm familiar with the issues surrounding Washington State. They had a gas plant in state, and they wanted to penalize the operation of that gas plant according to green energy thinking that they have. They wanted to give the penalty, but they also wanted to give a benefit to a credit to the ratepayers in the state. So they didn't want it to impact in-state ratepayers. And so their policy was to stick it to everybody outside of Washington State. My idea for a general tax, whether it's a generation tax or a gross receipts tax, will apply to everyone equally. Okay? Every state. Wyoming customers just as much as theirs. Now, if we tomorrow were to reduce the sales tax on electricity, Washington's not going to care. They're not going to bitch about that. Sorry, I didn't mean to use that's vulgar, but they won't care about that. And if we on next year put in a general tax that affected Wyoming as much as the other states, it's different than what Wyoming did with the Cholla plant, because it would be putting in these penalties for running Cholla, but also apply the penalties equally to their own state, which they did not do. Now, there is a thing with Rocky Mountain Power. It's called the multi-state protocol. It's in negotiation kind of right now, but it's a long-standing agreement about how we share the what's called the system resources, the transmission lines, the generation plants, and how we divide them up. That's where Wyoming got the 15% share of all that. And states are moving in different directions, so that agreement is stressed. And I'm confident that their testimony is true in the sense that other states will scream and argue about this, and it will have to be litigated. But if we prevail, and we make all our implementation contingent on the final prevailing, I guess, and it's worth fighting for. And it's an interstate commerce thing. We're not treating states differently. We're treating everybody the same. So it's a matter of, we need a law firm that will defend this position, and through the LSO and the Attorney General and things. The attorneys for WIAC, the industrial consumers would like this if it could work, but the attorneys for WIAC also represent renewable energy clients, and renewable energy operators are not going to like this because they love the situation in Wyoming right now, and they want to literally, it seems like, bury us in renewable facilities that we're going to have on our landscapes for decades. They're not going to go away. Because when you build like a wind farm, Mr. Chairman, the cost of building the wind farm, the most important costs are the permitting, which is arduous and difficult, getting the power lines clear across the country into the site. Those are the biggest costs of all. Adding generators and foundations and towers and wind turbines and solar farms, that's cheap. And when those wear out, you just replace them. And if the permitting period ends, you go get another permit because it's the highest and best use for that site now that you're the dominant use of it. So we're talking, if you think in 50 years, we won't need electrons that are produced by moving wind, maybe nuclear will be so cheap that that won't matter. But I imagine those resources will still be on our landscape paired with other dispatchable things, or the system's not going to work, but they're going to be there. And we ought to get something out of it for Wyoming. We really should. So I hope we'll just keep moving this forward. And I need to give credit to Don Burkhart for coming up with the idea about getting rid of the sales tax. Because I've been talking about imposing a tax, and Don Burkhart goes, well, you could make this work by getting rid of the sales tax. Brilliant. So anyway, you know what? You guys do what you want with the bill. If you want to make a statement and move it forward, I'm very grateful that you let me explain it to you, and you took this time, Mr. Chairman. That's very respectful of the committee, and I appreciate all you guys. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, and we learned something tonight, so we
So did I.
appreciate you. So
Thank you.
appreciate you. Yeah,
I'm going back up to corporations. If that's
Good luck
okay.
down there,
All right, you
and
too.
we'll see you tomorrow.
All right, thanks.
All right. Any more testimony on Senate File 85 before we wrap her up? Seeing none. Okay, now committee. We've heard from the bringer. What's your pleasure?
Can we discuss it a little bit?
Yeah, you can discuss it. Oh, yeah, you got to move it if you want to discuss it.
I'll move it.
Do pass or do not pass? You have a choice. Just move it. Okay, it's been moved. Discussion. All right.
So the bringer of the bill, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're- Thank you, Chairman Beitman. There was discussion earlier today about making an amendment to this bill that would essentially leave out the companion bill part of this and just run it as repealing the sales tax, essentially. So we didn't discuss that while he was here, but he was, sounds amenable to going ahead and running the bill. How do we look at, is there any reason to run the bill if we don't make this amendment because the companion bill is gone? Thank you.
Mr. Pappas.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think if we make the amendment that was discussed earlier, that takes the other portion of it away, then this actually does do something, does create something, which I think is probably not what we intended to do, to remove all that sales tax. I think that would, you know, yeah, be great for the ratepayer probably and for the, but unintended consequences for government that relies on those taxes. I think if we leave it in there, nothing happens, right? For a while, until something happens down the line with that. I personally don't think that it should have been an interim topic to begin with. I'll vote no on the bill because I want to see it go to the interim. And I think Senator Case obviously knows it probably won't go through the body, even if he gets out of our committee, but certainly is worth an interim topic look so that we can have everybody at the table and discuss it. So I'd prefer to not pass the bill and talk about it in the interim. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator McEwen?
I think the bill's incomplete without the companion bill too. Even if we take that language out, we've kind of chopped it up. And I don't think it does what it intended to do. That's my 2 cents anyway.
Senator French, you have any thoughts or?
Oh, I've got lots of things running through my brain, lots of things. No, I think it should be an interim bill too. I think there's just too many unanswered questions on it. So I'll be a no.
All right. I agree. I think it was going to be a good interim topic. Call for the question. Question
Question.
being called. Clayton, please call the roll.
Senator French,
I'm sorry. I read. I just said I was tired. No.
Senator Ide,
No.
Senator McEwen,
Maybe, or I mean, no.
Senator Pappas,
No.
Chairman Beitman.
No.
That is 0 ayes and 5 noes.
Okay, that has not passed the Revenue Committee and is permanently postponed. Okay, now, committee, we are back on the last bill of the day. You find it. Senate File 130. We were in the middle of testimony and we heard from the University of Wyoming, Mr. Smith. We got through him and then we had to go back upstairs. So we'll open it back up to public comment. And come on up. Welcome to Revenue this late at night. Nothing better to do on a Tuesday night.
I have nothing better to do,
hang out at the
Mr.
Revenue.
Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman. My name is Erin Taylor. I am the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees. And so I just wanted to get up here and support the university in their comments. I did have a college president with me earlier today, but she wasn't able to stay for this. So I have a statement that she's prepared for me, and that's what I'm going to read to you. I cannot answer the questions directly on what the colleges do or not do. Is that fair?
Fair enough.
So I'll read you what Dr. Watson gave me. It says the community colleges are open access institutions. While each college is unique, we accept the students equally and prioritize our efforts to support each student for success. We have no preferential student or employment practices and follow all state and federal regulations as required by law. We do not offer any DEI academic programs. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the statement that I have for you. The colleges really try and meet the students where they're at.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Taylor. Any questions?
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, yeah. Who's next? Come on up, don't be shy. Y'all three can come at the same time. Welcome to the Revenue Committee. We ask you to please identify, each of you tell us who you are, who you represent, address the chair, and we'll address you through the chair as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jean-Luc Wilson. I'm a sophomore at the University of Wyoming.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Maya Wooster. I'm a freshman at the university.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Sophia Gomelski, and I'm a student at the University of Wyoming.
All right, thank you. Who wants to go first?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I am here to testify in negation to this bill. I share my heartfelt concerns about the closure of our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. As we deliberate on this legislation, I urge you to consider the contributions that this office has had to the University of Wyoming. The University of Wyoming's mission statement is to, quote, "Nurture an environment that values and manifests diversity, internationalization, free expression, academic freedom, personal integrity, and mutual respect." And we believe that the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion helps to achieve this mission statement. Let us not overlook the tangible and indispensable services that this office provides to our students and the community at large. The ODEI provides a pivotal role in many of the following areas: supporting religious accommodations to ensure that students are able to express a diverse range of religious expressions, promoting civil discourse during and around election season to facilitate the civil discussion of political ideas, accessibility advocacy, ensuring that our campus is accessible to all people, whether they have physical disabilities or not, and advocating on behalf of those that are physically disabled, and student employment and research opportunities to ensure that students have the opportunities and funding to do the research for whatever they have to do. These are not merely checkboxes on a bureaucratic form. They are the lifelines that connect our university to the fabric of Wyoming, and they contribute to the rich tapestry of our state's cultural, intellectual, and economic landscape. As we contemplate the implications of this file, let us recognize the deep and lasting impact that this office has had on the University of Wyoming and the well-being of our students. It has helped to promote many different programs, including mental health. I also have some concerns about how it affects institutions other than the University of Wyoming, especially our public schools, where there are programs that appeal to some of these, such as the Gay Straight Alliance or the Latina Leadership, all of which would be affected under the provisions in this bill, and are spaces where our students can come together and express not separatism, but inclusion within our communities as a whole. In conclusion, let us be cautious not to dismantle this system that has brought us so much good to our state. I urge you to reconsider the potential consequences of this Senate file and to preserve the positive impacts that the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion has had for our students at the University of Wyoming and across the state. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We'll do questions as you finish. So Senator French has a question for you.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe your name is Sean?
Jean-Luc, Jean-Luc.
wrote it down wrong too.
I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah,
hard of hearing.
yeah, it's Jean
J-E,
-Luc. Yeah, it's a French name.
okay. Thank you for that, sorry about
Absolutely.
that.
No problem, thank you.
Can you comment on kind of today's hot topic on kind of the violence against the Jewish people, the Free Palestine movement, and that? Do you support the Jewish students at the college through the DEI equally as maybe you support the Palestinian cause? Do you fight for the Jewish students just as hard?
Jean-Luc?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator French. So although I am not an employee of the ODEI, so I cannot speak on their behalf, but as far as I am aware on campus, there has been adequate advocacy and protection of our Jewish students as much, if not more than our Palestinian students and our Muslim religious affiliations as well. The mission of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is never to exclude or diminish the impact of any religious identity, and instead to try and uplift the voices of those that are impacted by global issues, such as the violence being seen currently in Israel, and ensuring that the people that are affected by it have the resources in case they need that help. Thank you.
Senator McEwen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I read through this bill, have you read it?
Yes, Senator.
And I'm going to ask you if you agree with me. In nowhere do I see where this changes whether you can have a DEI, whether it doesn't change, and we had the conversation with the president of the university, it doesn't change academics or classes or tests. I think the thing says everybody should be treated even and nobody's special. I think that's all it's trying to do. So if you've read it, would you kind of agree with what I'm saying? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. John Luke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator McCohen. I disagree with that assessment of the bill. I think in section I as well as II, it talks about how it will prohibit governmental agencies from engaging in diversity, equity, and inclusion programs or policies, which would impact our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which is separate from any specific academic program, but is still a part of our university and our university community. And all of the benefits that I outlined earlier are facilitated through that office, which I believe would be specifically targeted to that bill. And I would also like to pass the question to Sophia as well, if that is okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Just saying, Senator McEwen has a one follow-up, and then we'll go on down the line. here
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
After he's done with you. Senator
As I'm
McEwen?
looking at it, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I'm looking at it, it says a policy that promotes differential or preferential treatment. I think that's the key word of that whole paragraph. It doesn't say exclude anybody. It says everybody should be judged on by their own self. It's a meritocracy. And that's why I would ask you, have you noticed those words? Because they're really the crux of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. John Luke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator McCohen. I believe that is the intention behind this bill, but I believe that those very words, differential treatment or preferential treatment, specifically combined with the next part where it says individuals, where it says a program that classifies such individuals on the basis of race, color, sex, national origin, gender identity, or sexual orientation, limits the office on the types of policies it can pursue for awareness and inclusion. For example, when it comes to like advocating for or promoting activities associated with possibly a sexual diversity program, or maybe trying to bring somebody in to speak on that. It could limit their ability to do so because it would be a program classified under the basis of sex, which it appears to me that this bill would prohibit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. Sorry, you did great, John Luke. We're going to go to your friends now. Next up.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman and senators, for giving me the chance to speak. And thank you to all community members for joining us today. Like I said earlier, my name's Maya Wooster. I'm a freshman at University of Wyoming, and I've been a Wyomingite for 5 years now. So topics like this are very important to me as they do affect my community and all others in Wyoming. Thank you again for that chance. One of my primary concerns with this bill is that it could conflict with some incredibly important anti-discrimination and harassment policies across the board, which oftentimes have certain provisions for sex, gender, and race, among the other things listed within this legislation. This will be detrimental to campus and statewide policies around harassment, both sex-based and otherwise. which as a woman and the child of an immigrant is quite harrowing. The DEI office at the University of Wyoming has supported many groups that expand beyond those listed in this bill. They've spearheaded many programs for disabled people, and without that kind of support, we hurt more than just the groups outlined in this legislation. They also importantly play a part in Title IX resources, language resources, religious inclusion, and much, much more, all to the benefit of students, staff, and community members of Laramie. Without easy access to these kinds of resources, we make communities less safe, and we tell violators of such policies that they can violate those policies with impunity. Moreover, this doesn't solely target the university programs. As I alluded to previously, the entire state could suffer from a bill like this. In my high school, for example, we had a Latino leadership program that was fundamental in creating a community and facilitating a safe space for Latina women. But this bill would disallow that activity. I grew up for 5 years in Grand Teton National Park, and that environment taught me the invaluable lesson of appreciating freedoms and inclusion. I worked with the national park and state park workers on the trails, bettering accessibility and awareness of important issues pertaining to the park. Diversity, equity, and inclusion were all essential to that. And it would negatively impact everyone in that community if we pass this legislation. It would also send a message to the rest of the country about how little Wyoming cares about these topics. And while I understand that that definitely was not the intent of this legislation, I'm concerned that that could be the message it does send. For the sake of those people, for me, and for every other individual in Wyoming, I implore you to please vote against this bill. Thank you, and I'm willing to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions for Maya? Yes, Senator French, or yes, French. Tired.
Yeah.
Last time we checked, it's
Yeah.
still French, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm going to push back a little bit on that if this is passed, that the rest of the country will look at Wyoming as some Neanderthal walking on his knuckles, right? That's not the case. I don't care if you're gay, lesbian, there's so many terms, LGBTQ, whatever. I don't care. That's a personal choice. But it also boils down to the old adage, majority rules. And I know sometimes it's hard to hear, but the majority of the people in Wyoming don't like this. Well, they hold the DEI, you know, they hold the purse strings also. So, I mean, I'd like to just kind of flip it around to you or whoever. What if you were the majority in the state of Wyoming and you had 80–90% of the voting power and the power in the state, and somebody, maybe a cowboy group came and wanted to do whatever, you know, are you gonna defend them? I mean, do you see where I'm going with this? If you want to comment, thank you.
Go ahead, Maya.
All right, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Senator French. I absolutely understand the importance of that, and I agree that absolutely the rest of the state or the rest of the country may not necessarily see us like that. That concern did, however, come from things like bills that have passed in Florida, like the Don't Say Gay bill, for example, that became countrywide news. But then to touch on some of your later points, understandably, were I the majority of people in Wyoming, it's fair to say that I may not necessarily want to support minority groups as much. But I would argue that it's imperative that we push for minorities to feel that they have a place in Wyoming. I myself, I guess, would consider myself a minority, as I do have a mother from Argentina. And having grown up in a community that supported immigrants and supported women and people of color, I was able to recognize the importance of bringing together the majority and the minority groups in Wyoming and outside of Wyoming. So I think on a community-wide level and on a state level, it's incredibly important to make sure that the minority is represented, even if, to some extent, the majority dislikes that. Because when it comes to, when we boil it down, right, it's always going to feel worse to the majority when minority groups start to gain more inclusion. For example, when we look towards the 60s, when the civil rights movement was happening, a lot of people who were white in the country were incredibly upset about it, not necessarily because people of color had more rights than them, because they didn't, but simply because equality is going to feel worse to the person who is in power before. And I think it's important that we start to dismantle some of those ideologies. Thank you.
Like Senator French has a follow-up question here.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to get on your case. But I don't know anybody that's against the minorities. I really don't. I think that might be your perception or your friend's perception. It's not mine. And it's not, you go out across the state. I mean, there's a lot of minorities at the university. There's a college in my town, my place, up in Powell. There's a community college, one of 8, I think, across the state. Many minorities up there. Your comment on the 60s, I remember the 60s, or most of it. Some of it I forgot. But I was around then. That's telling you how old I am. Yeah, it was a different time then. But we're, 50, 60 years in the future now. The state of race relations, you name it, are not the same as in 68 when I was in high school. Not even light years apart, I'll tell you, light years apart. So I just wanted to push back a little. Wyoming's a great state. I've got people I know from many of the surrounding states, and they're just like, wow, Wyoming's great. Well, you're here because you think Wyoming's great. All 3 of you, I believe, are here because you think this state's great. So I think sometimes you guys, gals, whatever, need to take a deep breath and step back and look at the real surroundings that you're in, whether it's at the college, your job, whatever. It's not as bad as you think it might be. Now, that's my personal opinion, but I think if you take a deep breath and really think about it, it's not anything like you mentioned in the 60s, because I saw it. And so, thank you, ma'am.
Would you agree? We typically try to ask questions and not debate on the committees, so we're going to try to keep it. You don't have to answer, but I was just joking.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do agree. Wyoming is a wonderful place. And I didn't mean to imply that anyone in Wyoming is against minorities, or that right now is like the 60s, because of course, like you said, we've made great progress since then, and that is important to recognize.
Okay, we're going to keep moving along. You did great too. Last but not least, take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all so much for being here so late at night and taking the time to listen to us. We really do appreciate it. I said it before, my name is Sophia. I'm a student at the University of Wyoming. I'm graduating with my 2 bachelor's degrees here in the fall, and I've lived in Wyoming all of my life. I'm 18 years old, and I'm here because I love the state of Wyoming, and I love the University of Wyoming. I'm also a member of the ASUW, our student government on campus, and I'm also involved with about half a dozen other programs and activities at the university. I think I'm here first and foremost just as a student and as a student voice to urge you guys to consider student voices when it comes to legislation that impacts students, primarily students, especially at the university level. But other than that, I urge you to vote no on this bill because frankly, this bill represents an overreach of government authority. It sets a dangerous precedent by allowing the state government to dictate what issues and values are permissible within our public institutions, despite our university having just committed itself to freedom of expression and the principles of free speech. It flies in the face of principles of limited government and intervention, and it threatens to erode the autonomy of educational institutions, government agencies, and other entities that seek to foster diverse and inclusive environments, especially at a public university. Obviously, this legislation would most directly implicate the university's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office. So I'm asking you to carefully consider some potentially unintended consequences and implications of this bill, such as programs that our DEI office offers, such as the Grad Student Network, for students that are typically underrepresented in graduate schools, such as first-generation college students in Wyoming, which is particularly critical considering the enrollment cliff that we're facing at the university and the lack of retention. Our Accessibility Committee. I know I've spoken to various veterans on campus that have explained how important it is for them to have access to these resources and services that this legislation would potentially risk implicating. Also, our Inclusionary and Global Leadership Program, which is critical because language assistance resources for international students and critical learning is one of the primary reasons that a lot of students do come to the university. Especially, I study international studies and international affairs, and those programs help students get hired by agencies like the CIA and the NSA and make global connections at our university. It also would implicate religious accommodations. I really appreciate a senator bringing it up before, but as a Jewish student, this would infringe on my religious freedoms and abilities and the services that are offered to me by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office. I wouldn't feel as safe or accommodated on campus with any religious practices, and I don't think other religious students would either. It also implicates the civic engagement resources and events that are hosted by that office, such as lobbying training, so that students like us can come speak to you and engage with our government. Please, I urge you to uphold our Wyoming tradition of protecting free speech and diversity of thought and limited government intervention, ensuring that all Americans have, and Wyomingites, have equal opportunity. Please, senators, don't tread on me. Vote no on SF 130.
Thank you, Sophia. I'll respond first because it's my bill and it's my idea. And I'll tell you, the whole thrust of this bill is to get us back to the Wyoming Constitution and US Constitution. Article 1, Section 2, equality of all and their inherent right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All members of the human race are equal. That is our founding document in the state of Wyoming. It's beautiful. It's all we need. It's all we should need. Equal political rights, Article 1, Section 3. Since equality and the enjoyment of natural and civil rights is only made sure through political equality, the laws of this state affecting the political rights and privileges of its citizens shall be without distinction of race, color, sex, or any circumstance or condition whatsoever other than individual incompetency or unworthiness duly ascertained by a court of competent jurisdiction. Our founders said it best. This DEI push we're seeing lately walks the razor's edge of being unconstitutional, because when you start promoting one group of people at the expense of another, that's discrimination. On its face, it's discrimination. If you're gonna tear somebody else down to pull yourself up, you're discriminating against that group, whether it's a minority group or a majority group. And all of our rights are protected, whether you're in the smallest of minorities or the biggest majority. So having to have a bill to go into Title IX of the Wyoming statutes, which is the administration of government statutes, and actually having to say that we won't have a program, activity, or policy that promotes differential or preferential treatment of individuals based on these factors that you can't control, you're born with, is discriminatory, is a pretty sad state. It shows the sad state of affairs we're in right now. If we've got to actually legislate something like this that basically pushes us back to the Constitution and equal rights for all, and our state motto, for crying out loud, is equality. That's what the thrust of this bill is to do. It's not going to discriminate against anybody. It's going to do the opposite. It's going to take away your discrimination that you may not see because you guys are in it and you've been growing up through this DEI stuff and this cultural Marxism, and you're the oppressor versus the oppressed, and white males that are Christian are evil, and whatever. I don't know what you guys have been exposed to, but I can tell you what, there are people who are afraid to come testify because their voice doesn't matter anymore, because they're not in the cool kid club. And they're terrified. There's honor students that had to pull out of their honors classes because of fear of retribution from their professors who may not share political views with them. And they'll tell me, this whole diversity push, they want you all to look different but think the same. And that's not what we want from our institutions. We're not doing anybody a service by doing that. So that's where we're at. That's where our heart is. We just want to get back to the basics of everybody's equal, no matter what. And we're not going to discriminate. We're not going to treat anybody different based on these classifications. So with that, I'll turn it over to any committee member who has a question. Senator Ide.
Thank you, Chairman Beitman. Glad you guys came. Takes a lot of courage to get up in front of a bunch of stuffy legislators up here. You know, Senator Beitman said it as well, Chairman Beitman said it about as well as I ever could. But just to let you know, Wyoming is way ahead of the rest of the world. We were the equality state a long time ago, and we need to stick with that, with those thoughts. I mean, we don't need to change that to something else. I think it's sort of etched in stone, and we were the leaders of that. And, you know, the bringer of the bill, chairman here, I think it was Sophia at the end. This guy is the biggest champion of freedom, limited government, and don't tread on me. So he stands for those values that you mentioned. And you need to know that, because there's nothing in this bill attacking anybody. We just are looking to not sanction special interest groups at the University of Wyoming, essentially. And you know, we start going down that slippery slope, and it gets messy. But you know, I'll shut it down there. But thank you for coming and testifying. And we're just looking out for everybody, not just trying to cherry pick one group. It's everybody's got freedom in this state. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else have a question for Sophia before we let them go? Senator French?
I'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, like Senator Ide said, our chairman, Beitman, and everybody up here, we're champions of equality. We really are. I mean, Wyoming, I believe, was the first state that had a woman governor long time ago. Now, that's a huge statement as to how the people of this state feel. And in a matter of fairness, I pushed back against it too. I need to push back against you, Sophia.
Gently.
Gently.
Respectfully, I should.
Respectfully honest, I will be. You said something about wanting us to listen to you. Well, you're sitting there, and we're sitting here, and we're listening to you. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for coming, really.
Thank you, Senator. Great job. You have anything else you want to add? Yes, go ahead, Sophia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, I guess, follow up on some of the points that you all mentioned. And I know that one of them was about our equal opportunities and equality in this state and our ability to freely express ideas, thoughts, and opinions. And I think that's where we all agree. I don't think that anything that any of us have said has actually fundamentally disagreed with any of the shared values that we have. I think more of what we're saying is that students were not consulted in the creation of this bill. Unfortunately, just they weren't. And that I don't think it's appropriate, and I don't believe that the state government has any place dictating what policies or programs or activities that the University of Wyoming has at all, let alone other schools or districts. There are other means and mechanisms for the state government to influence legislation there, but this isn't one of them. My parents are both from the USSR. They both lived in Soviet Russia, And they can tell you about, and which they were here right now, they could tell you about how freedom of expression was not something that was valued, and they were discriminated against because they were Jewish. And that bills like these help protect the rights of Jewish students and professors and other religious groups at the university. It doesn't take away from anybody's rights, but it protects theirs. And it's really, really important that they do, which is why the university recently committed itself to upholding the principles of freedom of expression. But the university decided to do that because it was the university's decision and not the state government's. Thank you, Chairman.
All right. We'll just have to agree to disagree. And that's the beauty of our system. Thank you. Thank you all three very much. Appreciate
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? All right.
Mr. Chairman, committee, I can't follow that. I'm not going to be as eloquent as those students were. I'm so grateful that we have them. My name is Sarah Burlingame. I'm the director of Wyoming Equality, and we are in opposition to this bill, but we think we do have two highly workable solutions. One is if you look at Section A, Romanat 1, where it says diversity, equity, or inclusion, means any program, activity, or policy that promotes differential or preferential treatment of individuals or classifies such individuals, et cetera. I think as we saw from the conversation that we've had so far, that the problem is conflating the word differential with preferential. As your committee has noted, they mean two very different things, right? And I think we've found agreement that preferential is not appropriate and is not pursued by the university or the colleges in Wyoming. So my suggestion would be to keep preferential, as that is the main problem, and to strike the word differential. Because differential really does get us into some trouble. As people have mentioned in other spaces, having a male restroom is an example of a difference that is being noted and codified. I think there are a lot of unintended ways the differential could land on this that nobody on either side of this would want. And then the other thing I think that came out through the students' testimony was just how important the process is. And that if this is going to land squarely on the students who, work summer jobs and get the Hathaway Scholarship and choose Wyoming, why not involve them? And if what we all believe is true, which is we have the best students, we have the best university, we could also have the best process. We could have something that involves all campus clubs, that involves all students from the widest perspectives to weigh in on this. They could be intimately involved with the making of our laws. We could engage them in this process, and we could change and be changed by it. That's the ideal. My husband is always cranky when we pass appropriations for things to do with the university and they don't involve university students in it. He's very upset that engineering students didn't build the engineering facility. He would like the university to really have their hands in everything that is being done. And while we might quibble about the practicality of that, this is one place where I think you have the opportunity to do something kind of great. And I'll close just by telling you what I've seen while I've been at the University of Wyoming campus lately. I've seen a university that is more committed and is more embodied in its commitment to free speech on campus than any other campus in America. I think we have the ability to lead out on this. I hear your concerns when you say, I watch the news and I think that there is one side of a conflict that will be supported on a campus and another side that won't. That's not happening at the University of Wyoming. And it's not happening not because of, it doesn't happen by accident. It only happens when you put these principles into action and you have support for them by the staff and the students. And to interrupt that by saying, no diversity, no equity, no inclusion, the state government is going to come in, we're going to come over the top of you, and we're going to decide how those are spent. I think it's short-sighted, and I think it sells the university, its students, and its faculty short, because if you were on campus and you saw the sort of free speech activities that were taking place, like recently, there was a forum between the pro-choice reproductive rights students and the Turning Point pro-life students. And the gal who does regionally the Students for Life campus direction was there to observe the event. And I asked her very pointedly, but I mean, she could have had a different answer, you know, what she thought of how they did it at the University of Wyoming. And in the 6 states that she covers, she said she hasn't seen anything like it. She hasn't seen the level of engagement. She hasn't seen the commitment to civility and to free speech. She hadn't seen students who knew how to have a public conversation about a hard topic. Well, that was a diverse setting. It was an equitable setting, and it was one that had the university's values of inclusion. These are really hard things, and we have an opportunity right now to amend this bill to say we're going to take out the differential part because it has some unintended consequences and maybe doesn't meet the needs of what you need with preferential. But there's also the opportunity to lay it back and say, let's commit to the process that the students have suggested. Let's go to the campus. Let's let them become involved. Let's hear their input on what they think diversity and equity inclusion should look like on campus. Thank you for staying late. Thank you for being gentlemen and making us feel welcome. And I appreciate your time.
Well, you're always welcome. Thank you, former Representative Burlingame. I miss our conversations. We had some good ones. Committee, before I forget, because it's so late and I'm tired, I'll forget this point, but I'll point out that we would have liked to have been a part of the conversation when the university trustees decided to start this whole DEI program. We weren't involved, even though we write the checks and we set policy for this state and our flagship organization. So we were kind of out of the loop. It happened, now we're responding through. We're responsive to our constituents. When the phone rings, we pick it up. When the emails come in, we listen and we engage and we try to solve problems and alleviate their concerns. And if they have concerns, it's a major issue. We have some major donors that are very concerned about the direction things are going. And so there's 2 sides to every story, obviously. We welcome all sides. We like to hear everybody's side, so we appreciate you. That's my statement.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Senators.
All right. Anybody left out there? 2 online? All right. Let them in. Go. All right, we see you. Please introduce yourself.
Okay,
Welcome.
great.
To
I see you too. Mr. Chairman, my name is Deborah East. I voted in Lander for 45 years. Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciated the people who have preceded me. I have some different things that I'm going to add, but I appreciate everything that they have said. I speak in support of diversity, equity, and inclusion as a means to pursue the fullness of equality. Stating it in the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, or the Wyoming Constitution is an aspiration yet to be practically fully realized. Here are some personal examples that I bring to my dedication to this. When Edith Babbitt, my great-grandmother, married William Doherty in the late 1800s, in north central Michigan, she broke a law for school teachers. Married women were not allowed to teach in our country, espousing equality. William set up the farm in Wexford County on his own. Edith, living and teaching 2 counties to the east, kept her married status to herself to earn money until the school year's end to join William. If calling for fair and equal treatment resulted in the same, governance would be very different now. Diversity, equity, and inclusion approaches and training are additional steps in the hundreds of years of reaching for understanding, individual opportunity, and collaboration for thriving relationships between people and the contexts which sustain us. Human rights and dignity continue to be challenged by uncertainty from change or evolving human ideals, perception of financial cost rather than investment in equality, or a belief that rights are inherently limited. If a version of DEI existed in the late 1800s of North Central Michigan, a teacher would not have to have lied in order to keep working, and the farm may have been a partnership with Indigenous people of the area. Senate File 130 leads me to believe that active DEI has had success because questions continue, as does the work. When Matthew Shepard was murdered 25 years ago, there was a debate about how could this happen in Wyoming? The answer, equality was not practiced. His brutal death for many of us was not a first, yet rather a last straw. Those of us in dominant groups, such as white, cisgender, middle to upper class, set out to learn more about stereotypes and effective redress of behaviors and human rights to reach equality for all. I am grateful for the efforts and change at the University of Wyoming and in Laramie. I do not see the same success even in my town. I was a supervisor for 12 years applying diversity, equity, and inclusion to deepen mutual respect within a student service team, supporting 22,000 students worldwide, whose diversity was respected and mistakes offered learning for our improved support. Over those years, the student service team included people who were lesbian, white, Indigenous, single mothers, deaf, cisgender men or women, and many ages. When COVID-19 required a workplace response, the collaborative strength and mutual respect were key in undertaking the daily challenges of that time. Rather than eliminate DEI, as declared by Senate File 130, DEI should be supported to share the aspiration of equality as a living practice. It would be fulfilling to do so together, and I would urge a do not pass majority vote for Senate File 130. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deborah. Any questions for Ms. East? Any questions? Seeing none, we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us tonight.
You're welcome. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Caldwell in front of all of you. He gave me good information and direction as things changed from midday. So he's doing a wonderful communication job out here.
He's one of our best and brightest. We appreciate him.
Thank you.
Okay, who do we have next?
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Can't see you though. Do you have your camera on?
Hang on a minute. Now, can you see me?
There you are. Yes. Please introduce yourself. Welcome to Senate Revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Laura Tolliver Pearson. I'm from Southwest Wyoming. I'm a sheep rancher and a school bus driver. I first want to commend the university students for testifying, because that takes a lot of bravery, and we need people like this, as our future leaders. I am 100% in support of this bill. Equity is not equality. Equality means everyone is treated the same regardless of their differences. Equity means everyone is provided with what they need to succeed. It sounds beautiful in theory, but really, if someone is lazy or expects handouts, it creates the mentality that people feel entitled rather than working towards their goals. Our founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence mention life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, emphasizing pursuit. This doesn't mean happiness is given. Equality. Everybody has a chance to reach their happiness based on hard work. Equity creates a playing field for everyone to obtain happiness regardless of the work put in. Equity leads to socialism. Equality leads to freedom. We must return the focus of our nation to strength of diversity and promoting a merit-based approach where individuals are judged on their qualification, skills, and contribution, not to fulfill a woke agenda and further victimize our future generations. To restore true American values on what our country was founded on, we need true solidarity in the belief that everyone is equal. DEI and this equity agenda completely contradict the basis for which our equality state was founded. Martin Luther King Jr. said it best: "My children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character." DEI is taking us backwards. Our children are becoming confused on the true meaning of diversity, equity, and inclusion, as the words and meanings become distorted to push an agenda that creates further division and victim mentality. DEI is wrong. We are all equal, so please stop this madness and support this bill. We have seen just today how damaging DEI has been in molding our children's minds. Thank you for allowing my testimony today.
Thank you, Ms. Pearson. We appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts with us. Committee, is there any questions? Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. That take care of the Zoom? Okay, no more Zoom, no more in the room. We'll close public comment. Committee, what is your pleasure?
Bill.
Moved by I. Second by French. Any amendments or discussion? I brought two conceptual amendments. I'm not necessarily moving them. Clayton, could you pass those out to the committee? I had them typed up this afternoon after hearing some conversation earlier. Hopefully alleviate some concerns. First one deals with, I don't think it's necessarily needed. I talked to the LSO attorney who drafted this for me, and I flat out asked him if you know, we need to state explicitly that this subsection shall not apply to speech or actions protected by the U.S. Constitution and the Wyoming Constitution. He says, well, it's already implied and anytime you pass a law, but we hear a lot of what ifs, you know, with the word differential treatment, for example. This amendment would tighten it up, so it would make it crystal clear that if what you're doing or what these government agencies are doing is already protected by the U.S. Constitution, such as separate bathrooms and scholarships or whatever we're doing, it's already protected. This bill has no effect on it whatsoever. So I hesitate to offer it. I'll leave it up to you as a committee to decide, but if you feel that added verbiage is necessary and needed to thwart off a barrage of red herrings on the floor, then go for it. If not, I'm fine either way. And the other bill, or the other amendment, simply brings in, because when you do stuff in Title IX, there's not a lot of teeth to it. And this would provide a person whose rights that they feel have been violated, or if a rogue governmental entity decides not to follow the law, civil action may be taken and then get an injunction from a court. And if the party prevails, they can get their attorney's fees back. So that's what these two conceptual amendments would do. Committee, take them, leave them, do what you want. The bill is yours. I'll stand back and follow your lead. I'll entertain any motions. Senator Ide.
Thanks, Chairman Beitman. I'm always simple is better. The First Amendment, you know, I'm kind of like you, I could go either way, but adding to it, I'm not a fan of, I guess, just to have some discussion. And so, you know, my preference would probably be to leave it out at this point, unless here's some good arguments otherwise. And amendment number 2, let me look at that here real quick. Let's see, page 2, line 18, after policy. So it's right at the end of it there. A chance to look at this. The subsection shall apply to the speech or actions protected by the United States Constitution. That language sounds fairly good, just because it's all going back to the Constitution, the United States Constitution, the Wyoming Constitution. Just sort of reiterates that that's what we operate here in the legislature. Maybe we don't need it, maybe we do. I guess any other discussion on that?
Senator French.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the bill as written is just fine. I don't support any of the amendments.
Thank you, sir. Senator Pappas, do you have a thought either way?
No, I can just tell you, I know your intent in this bill, and I applaud the intent. I don't think the language in this bill is doing what I think you're wanting it to do. Frankly, I think it's very confusing, the way I read it, and I think it's going to create some legal issues out there if anybody ever tries to draw any litigation one way or the other, because I think that, I know your intent, I just don't think this bill does it. So I'm going to be a no on the bill.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Any further amendments? Discussion? Senator Ide?
Just reiterate some of the conversation earlier in the spirit of limited government. You know, it takes money to pay for that department, and that grows government, and it takes more money from the taxpayers, and and with that you get less freedom. So I'm ready to vote on the bill.
Okay. Question being called. Clayton, will you please take the roll? Take us home.
Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator McEwen.
Senator McEwen left a proxy vote or an absentee voting form of aye.
Senator Pappas.
No.
Chairman Beitman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that is 4 ayes and 1 no.
Thank you, Clayton. Thank you, committee. Thank you, everybody. Now we can go home and get to bed before midnight. This committee is adjourned. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. You guys go to
Yeah, see you later.
what time? I have vacation early. What time is it? 6:30. Get to bed.
See you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.